Sajid Javid.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement regarding the events that have been unfolding in Amesbury and Salisbury. This morning, I chaired a meeting of the Government's Emergency Committee COBRA covering the ongoing investigation in Amesbury. I've been separately briefed by the security services and by counter-terrorism police. As many of you will now know, a 45-year-old man and a 45-year-old woman were found to be unwell at a property in Muggleton Road in Amesbury on Saturday. Both are British citizens. Paramedics attended the scene and admitted the pair to the A&E department at Salisbury District Hospital. Here they were treated for exposure to an unknown substance. Further testing by expert scientists in chemical warfare at Porton Down Laboratory confirmed this to be the nerve agent of the type known as novichok. This has now been identified as the same nerve agent that contaminated both Yulia and Sergei Skripal. The pair are currently in critical condition, and I'm sure the whole House will join me in wishing them a full and swift recovery. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to the emergency services and the staff at Salisbury District Hospital for their tireless professionalism and the dedicated way in which they are providing it. I understand, of course, that there will be some concerns about what this means for public safety. In particular, I recognise that some local Wiltshire residents will be feeling very anxious. Let me reassure you that public safety is of paramount importance. Public Health England's latest assessment is that, based on the number of casualties affected, there is no significant risk to the wider public. Their advice is informed by scientists and the police as the facts evolve. Dame Sally Davis, the Chief Medical Officer, has confirmed that the risk to the public remains low and has asked the public to follow the advice of Public Health England and the police. She has also advised that people who have visited the area the areas that have been recently cordoned off, that they should wash their clothes and wipe down any items that they may have been carrying at the time. She has also urged people not to pick up any unknown or already dangerous objects such as needles or syringes. This is not new advice, and it follows on from what was said in March. We have a well-established response to these types of incidents and clear processes to follow. All the sites that have been decontaminated following the attempted murders of Sergei and Yulia Skripal are safe. All sites which have been reopened have undergone rigorous testing, and any items that may have harboured any residual amounts of the agent were safely removed for disposal. We have taken a very robust approach to decontamination, and there is no evidence that either the man or the woman in hospital visited any of the places that were visited by the Skripals. Our strong working assumption is that the couple came into contact with the nerve agent in a different location to the sites which have been part of the original clean-up operation. The police have also set up 2 dedicated phone numbers for anyone with concerns relating to this incident. Salisbury District Hospital remains open as usual, and it is advising people to attend routine operations unless they are contacted and they are told otherwise. We are taking this incident incredibly seriously and working around the clock to discover precisely what has happened, where and why. Be assured that we have world-leading scientists, intelligence officers and police on this case. Local residents can expect to see an increased police presence in and around Amesbury and Salisbury. All 6 sites that were visited by the pair before they collapsed have been cordoned off and are being securely guarded as a precaution. An investigation has started to work out how these 2 individuals came into contact with the nerve agent. Around 100 detectives from the counter-terrorism policing network are working to support this investigation alongside colleagues from Wiltshire Police. Obviously, this incident will invoke memories of the reckless attempted murder attempts of Sergei and Yulia Skripal earlier this year. And I know that many of you will question whether this incident is linked to that one. That is clearly the main line of inquiry. However, we must not jump to conclusions, and we must give the police the space and the time to carry out their investigations. The police's work will take time. But we are ready to respond as and when new evidence comes to light and the situation becomes clearer. Following the events in Salisbury earlier this year, we rapidly worked with international partners at the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to confirm our identification of the nerve agent that was used. Through a process of extensive, impartial testing and analysis, our findings were confirmed correct beyond doubt. The use of chemical weapons anywhere is barbaric and inhumane. The decision taken by the Russian government to deploy these in Salisbury on March the 4th was reckless and callous. There is no plausible alternative explanation to the events in March other than the Russian state was responsible. And we acted accordingly. The British government and the international community immediately and robustly condemned this inhuman action. In light of this attack, the UK expelled 23 Russian diplomats from our shores, and we were joined by 28 of our closest allies in this action, from the United States to Ukraine, who expelled over 150 of the Russian state's diplomats. We have already seen multiple explanations from state-sponsored Russian media regarding this latest incident. We can anticipate further disinformation from the Kremlin, as we saw following the Salisbury attack. And as we did before, we will be consulting with our international partners and allies following these latest developments. The eyes of the world are currently on Russia, not least because of the World Cup. It is now time that the Russian state comes forward and explains exactly what has gone on. Let me be clear. We do not have a quarrel with the Russian people. Rather, it is the actions of the Russian government that continue to undermine our security and that of the international community. We will stand up to the actions that threaten our security and the security of our partners. It is completely unacceptable for our people to be either deliberate or accidental targets, or for our streets, our parks, our towns to be dumping grounds for poison. We will continue with our investigations as a matter of urgency, and I will keep the House and the public updated on any significant developments. I commend this statement to the House.
Diane Abbott.
I want to thank the Home Secretary for making his statement to this House and for prior sight of it. And the whole House appreciates that he came here directly from a COBRA meeting. As the Home Secretary said, the first duty of any government is to secure the safety and security of its people and all of those resident in this country. And no government can allow the poisoning of its citizens or residents as they go about their daily lives by state actors or others. And as the Home Secretary has said, the use of chemical weapons is both barbaric and inhumane. Our thoughts and best wishes go out to Dawn Sturgis and Charlie Rowley, and we wish them a speedy and complete recovery. I'd also like to place on record the admiration and support on this side of the House for the work of the emergency services, the security services, and the vital public servants at Porton Down. The Home Secretary will appreciate how alarmed the public, particularly the people of Wiltshire, must be at the second incident involving the nerve agent novichok in 4 months. And this incident has occurred long after local people had been assured that there had been a thorough clean-up of the area. We understood that numerous areas across Salisbury had been decontaminated at great expense and with great thoroughness. And it is still not clear whether this is a wholly separate incident or the fallout from the original incident, but with effects being felt months apart. The Home Secretary will appreciate that if there are connections between this latest incident and the Skripal case, other than the type of nerve agent involved, the House and the general public will obviously want to know as soon as possible. The House has not received an update on the Skripal case for some time. The Home Secretary may want to take this opportunity to update the House and the general public about ongoing work on the Skripal case. The House and the public at large want reassurance, but they'll want it based on facts, and I agree with the Home Secretary when he says we should not jump to conclusions. We need the facts on this serious matter, but no doubt members across this House will resist the temptation to engage in wild speculation or to offer their own guesswork as informed opinion. But members across this House and the general public will eventually want to understand how this incident could have occurred. There will be other issues that the public will be concerned about. Do the local police have the resources they need? And will the government be providing them and the local authority with the additional emergency funding for the enormous drain on resources that this investigation and the securing of various sites will inevitably involve? And the second incident, as well as causing great public concern, will be a blow to business and retail in the area who were just recovering from the fallout around Salisbury. What support will they be given? And can he also assure the public that this new clean-up and decontamination effort will be exemplary in its thoroughness? There are also some matters he might usefully raise with his colleagues in the Department of Health. Do all the relevant emergency workers and health professionals have sufficient information to recognise the symptoms of this type of poisoning, and do they have the advice on how to respond to these suspected cases? The public will have noted that although Dawn Sturgis and Charlie Rowley took ill on Saturday night and were taken to exactly the same hospital as Skripals, apparently it took 2 days to refer the case to Portland Down. As the Home Secretary has said, the eyes of the world are on Russia, and we will all have seen the very warm and enthusiastic response of the Russian people to people coming from all over the world for the World Cup. But on this side of the House, we supported the expulsion of the 23 Russian diplomats and other related actions that Her Majesty's government took in the wake of Salisbury, and we will support any action that the government takes that will keep our people safe. We cannot allow the streets of ordinary British towns and communities to become killing fields for state actors.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all thank the Right Honourable Lady for her support and her comments, and also join her and state once again that the whole House wishes the victims a very speedy recovery. And also I very much welcome her questions, and let me try and take each of those in turn. The Right Honourable Lady has asked for, perfectly correctly, for reassurance that that this incident is not connected in any way to the areas that were decontaminated with the original incident back in March. And we are very comfortable that is not the case, and that's not Minister's view on its own. That is the view of experts, and especially the decontamination experts. They are very clear, first of all, that the decontamination exercise was very successful, and so is Dame Sally Davies, the Chief Medical Officer, and we are happy to say those areas are all safe. And we are also comfortable from what we know that with this particular incident that neither individuals contracted or came into contact with the nerve agent from any of those decontaminated areas. That is our belief. She also asked me about if there's any more information, I guess, on the connection between this and the original incident. Of course, it is the main line of inquiry, I think, for obvious reasons for the police. But as she has alluded to, and it's worth restating, we should none of us prejudge the outcome of the investigation that is taking place. And as more evidence does come out and any information, then of course we will share it with honourable members and the wider public. She also rightly raised the issue of resources, and I can give that reassurance. In fact, one of the main things that was discussed at the COBRA meeting earlier today was to ensure that all the resources necessary are made available as they were back in March, and that we wanted to make sure that applied to everyone involved in dealing with this incident, but in particular local police, CT policing, security services, and I'm comfortable that any resource that is required, and if there are any further requests, that they will be met. That will be a priority for us. The Right Honourable Lady mentioned the impact on the local area, and she's right to state that. And I mean, this is an area where local people, I think, have been heroic in their response to the original attack, and how they have together as a community united and sent a very clear message of support for each other. At the time of the original incident, there was a lot of local support from the local council, Wiltshire Council, local political leaders, including the Member of Parliament for Salisbury, who himself just contacted me already from the moment he knew about the incident, asking about further support. So we are looking at what more can be done. We'll be meeting with the leader of the local council, Baroness Jane Scott, and talking precisely about that, including the Right Honourable Lady mentioned local businesses, which many of them were just starting to recover, in whether they're high street shops or local tourist trade, and we want to make sure that is as unaffected as possible. So we are looking at what further support we can provide those local businesses. She was absolutely right to raise that point too. The Right Honourable Lady also raised the issue around local health and local health expertise. And of course, the Department of Health is making sure that all health services that first of all, if any extra resources are required, that they will be provided. But also, especially at Wiltshire District Hospital, Salisbury District Hospital, that the support in there, in particular, given that's where these victims are, that they have all the support they need. And I would point out, from my current understanding, is that the two victims in this case, that the health professionals in the hospital were able to use some of the experience that they had got from the March's incident in looking at this case, and I think that has meant that the right type of medical support was provided earlier than perhaps it would have been provided otherwise. So I think that there is considerable local expertise, but of course if more needs to be provided, it will. And lastly, the Right Honourable Lady asked me about an update on the original case in terms of the police investigation. Of course, that is ongoing, both involving CT policing, local police and the security services, but it would be inappropriate for me to say anything further on that at this point.
Mr. Richard Benyon.
We can be sure that this incident will be used by Russian state misinformation campaigners to try and further obfuscate what happened in March. Would my right honourable friend agree that it is vital that we counter that through a steady drumbeat of telling the truth about what happened in March and giving as much information about this incident as we can when we can?
Yes, my honourable friend is absolutely right to make that point, and he will know that the Russian disinformation campaign has already begun. As soon as this news was public yesterday, I think we saw that certainly on social media, and it's very important for that reason and many more that the UK, together with our international allies, as more evidence of what happened here emerges, that we present that to the public and we make it very clear and very factual.
Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of his statement. As others have said, our immediate thoughts are with Charlie Rowley and Dawn Sturgis, and we do hope them a very speedy and full recovery. They are completely innocent victims in this whole affair. I would endorse also the statements that have been made in terms of our support for the emergency services. We can only wonder the concern that they must feel themselves for their own personal safety when they cope with matters of this kind. I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, particularly in two regards. One is to reassure the public that there is no generalised threat to the wider community and to dampen down irresponsible speculation that might be to the contrary. I also welcome the fact that he draws a distinction between the Russian people and the Russian state, particularly at this time, and I think that is a message that we should try hard to make sure resonates within Russia itself, particularly given the events which are happening there at the moment. I'd like, if I may, to press the Home Secretary in two respects. One is that he says that people will naturally be concerned to understand the link, if any, between this incident and the Skripal case. Is he in a position to tell us whether or not it is possible to identify whether the novichok in this instance is from the same batch as was used in the Skripal case, or will that not be possible? And will it therefore not be able to say that there is a direct link? And secondly, he has updated the House in terms of the expulsion of diplomats, but of course there were a great range of other measures discussed as well in terms of the response to March the 4th. I wonder if he could now, or if he could say when, he would be in a position to update the House on other matters, particularly with regard to the matter of seizure of Russian state assets and of improving checks at our borders.
Can I thank the honourable member for his response? And again, he's made a number of important points, and again, would join with him in commending the work of the emergency services. Their response has been absolutely exceptional, both back in March and from what we've seen in the last few days. He's also right to emphasise the distinction between the Russian people and the Russian state. Our quarrel is with the Russian state, not with the Russian people. And in fact, from what I think I can say, what we've all seen in the World Cup so far, from their response to and welcome to British fans, the British team, has been very nice to see, and I think emphasises the point the honourable member has made. He asked two questions, one about the nerve agent, and then second about Russian action. On the nerve agent, what we are clear on, from the scientists are absolutely clear on from Porton Down, is that this is this exact same nerve agent from the Novichok family of nerve agents, but the same type of nerve agent from that family that was used in the March attack. So we are very clear on that. He asked specifically about the batch. We cannot attribute this to the same batch at this point, and scientists will be looking into that. I've also been told that may not even be possible because of a number of factors, but we cannot rule out, of course, that it was from the same batch. So whilst we are comfortable that it is the exact same nerve agent, we at this point cannot say it's the exact same batch. He'd also asked about action against Russia, whether there's further action. I think, as I've said in the statement, as we continue with the investigation and as evidence emerges, we will respond accordingly.
Yeah. Sir David Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I strongly support my right honourable friend's statement today and the information that he's given us? Obviously, local people are going to need maximum reassurance. Will he reaffirm that the risk to the general public is very low and that the government's top priority is the safety and well-being of local residents?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to reaffirm that. And I think that the words of the Chief Medical Officer and Public Health England, the statement they were both made yesterday, they have both been very reassuring. The risk to the public remains low. There is advice from the Chief Medical Officer for those I mentioned briefly in my statement that believe they may have been in some of the same areas that are now cordoned off to take some precautionary action. I think that kind of belt and braces approach is very appropriate, but the risk to the public remains very low.
Yvette Cooper.
Can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement? Our police, intelligence officers and medical staff are among the best in the world, and I know they will be doing everything possible to keep people safe and pursue this vile crime against this couple, but also the original Skripal attack. But can he confirm that he has had no cooperation from the Russian government, which would be both revealing and shocking in itself, and also say a little bit more about Novichok and whether or how it degrades or deteriorates or how easy it is to detect, as he will be aware there is already conflicting information and potentially misinformation being circulated on this?
I thank the honourable lady for her questions. First of all, I can confirm that we have had no cooperation from the Russian government. And I think, given their responsibility for the original attack, I don't think, and their campaign of disinformation, I don't think anyone in the House would be surprised about that. And I've made clear today, if the Russians actually wanted to respond in a positive way and actually provide more information, for example, on Novichok, on how they dispose of the nerve agent, if they did, all this type of they could, and they have clearly chosen not to. And I have no doubt that in the coming days and weeks we will see a increased campaign of disinformation from the Russian state. The Right Honourable also specifically asked me about Novichok, that type of nerve agent. It is, like all nerve agents, it will deteriorate over some time, but my understanding is that in the case of this type of nerve agent, that some time can be months and months, and therefore it is scientifically it is perfectly possible that this is the exact same nerve agent that was used from the same batch. It could well be the exact same nerve agent that was used in March, because it would not have had enough time to deteriorate in any meaningful way. The Right Honourable also asked me about detecting nerve agent. It is not easy to detect at all. This isn't, for example, if there was a radioactive substance in something, there is detection equipment available for that, but detecting nerve agent is a very different matter, and there's no easy way at all to detect this. There are some ways to help find it, but it is hard to detect. That said, from what we've learnt back in March, that experience, which is considerable experience that's been built up, that will help us in responding to this incident too.
Order. Understandably, a significant number of honourable and right honourable members wish to participate in these exchanges and to question the Home Secretary. There is a debate to follow on proxy voting which is well subscribed and which risks having very little time left for it. If that were to transpire, it would of course be open to the government to reschedule that debate on another occasion so that members were not disappointed. But in the meantime, if people could ask short questions and the Home Secretary provide short replies, that would help. Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's quite extraordinary and shocking the statements that are already coming out of Russia on this. Does my right honourable friend agree that it's really important that we must work with our international allies to counter the fake news and the disinformation coming from Russia and others?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I very much agree with my honourable friend, and that is exactly what we have been doing, especially since the incident in March. But I think that this recent incident is a reminder that there's more to do.
Sir Edward Davey.
Can I thank the Home Secretary for his excellent statement and join others in celebrating his distinction between our condemnation of the Russian government and our support for the Russian people. His careful phrasing today and his diplomatic sensitivity is vital. Will he reassure the House that all ministers will follow his lead and his calm strength?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Philip Holloway.
It's the need to support local organisations. Budgeting in an annual budget cycle for an international chemical weapons attack simply doesn't happen. So the local council, the local hospital, the local police force, local businesses need financial support from central government, and they need it quickly.
Yeah, my honourable friend is absolutely right on that point, and he will recall that when the previous incident happened, I was the local government secretary and was very much aware of that, and we provided support then, and we will certainly be providing support again this time.
McFadden.
The Home Secretary, in his statement, referred to the strong solidarity that Britain's allies had shown to us in the wake of the Skripal incident a few months ago. Can I ask him, is he confident that we can maintain strong solidarity in the wake of this incident among liberal democracies, and does he agree that this is essential when the forces of nationalism are on the rise in a number of countries.
Mr. Speaker, I do agree very much with the honourable gentleman on this, and I think having that unity amongst freedom-loving nations is very important in the face of this type of incident. And of course, there are a number of important multilateral events coming up: the Western Balkan Summit, the NATO summit coming up, the President of America's visit to the UK, and I think those are all fresh opportunities to build that solidarity.
Victoria Prentice.
When does the Home Secretary expect the police to be able to update the public?
I can understand, Mr. Speaker, that people will want to know as soon as possible on the police investigation. But from what I've heard from the police, it will take some time from the briefing I had this morning. We do need to give them that time, but I can give the assurance to my honourable friend, as we get more information, we will bring it to this House immediately.
John Woodcock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If and when the government comes to the conclusion that Russia was responsible for this attack, whether through targeting or by accident, will the government be pursuing further coordinated action with our allies in response to this?
I think, Mr. Speaker, absolutely we need to keep all options open. I think the honourable gentleman would understand that the focus for right here and now, and certainly the focus in today's COBRA meeting, is very much about public safety, the police investigation, and the victims and support for them. But I'm sure as more information comes to light, we will be considering other options.
Craig Tracy.
Mr. Speaker, obviously this situation is distressing and being monitored by many of our constituents all around the country. Can my right honourable friend reassure the House that this incident is being treated with the utmost seriousness and that the government's been kept regularly updated on developments?
Mr. Speaker, I can give my honourable friend that assurance, in that with since the moment we've known about the incident, in how we have responded, not just at government, but just as importantly from local emergency services, the local council, local policing, counter-terrorism policing, and we will keep treating this, of course, in that way as an absolute priority.
Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, what more can the government do to tackle the misinformation coming out from the Russian state about this issue?
The honourable lady asked, again, another important question, and there are no easy ways. And I think what we have learnt since the March incident is to call it out whenever we see it, and that's not just government, but I think from wider responsible media, members of parliament and others, and also to work with our international allies, because this misinformation is not just often directed at us or the British public, but a wider international audience, and working with allies can also help.
Maggie Throop.
From the statement today and statements after the March incident, it's quite clear that our agencies are world-leading and are well recognised throughout the world as being that. But can he reassure the House that those agencies will have all the resources they need to get to the bottom of this situation?
Yes, I can give my honourable friend that absolute assurance. And as she'll know, there are a number of agencies and organisations involved in this incident, not just in terms of the criminal investigation, but in terms of the health issues, and I can give her that assurance.
Mike Gapes.
Mr. Speaker, the St Petersburg troll factories and the RT propaganda channel are already gearing up to spread misinformation. Couldn't we at least do a little bit more to expose this, and particularly members of this House on all sides not appear on Putin's propaganda television channel?
I think, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is absolutely right to raise this issue. There have been far too many incidents where members of this House sadly have supported the Russian propaganda machine, and RT, for example, is one way they have done that. If any member of this House has an ounce of common sense, they will realise, especially after the second incident, that the British public will not support any of them if they support President Putin.
John Howell.
The Croatian Prime Minister told me last week at the Council of Europe that the evidence that made him expel a Russian had been absolutely compelling. Will the Home Secretary make sure that the evidence that he produces will be just as compelling on this case?
Mr. Speaker, it's an opportunity to highlight just how seriously we take evidence and the facts. And already with this incident, our scientists, world-leading scientists, for example, have been involved in the identification of the nerve agent. And that is exactly how we will proceed. And as we gather that evidence, of course, we will be discussing it with our international allies.
Luke Pollard.
Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary is right to draw a distinction between the Russian government and the Russian people. With a potential clash between Russia and England in the World Cup, can I ask what conversations he's had with the Foreign Secretary to ensure that English fans in Russia are being kept up to date through regular and updated travel and Foreign Office advice?
Yep. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I can tell the honourable gentleman that even before the World Cup started, there was a very robust and well thought through plan put in place with work between my department and police and others in supporting British fans in Russia. In light of this incident, we will certainly be reviewing that. There's nothing to indicate in any way at this point that risk to Russian fans has changed in any way, but we want to keep that under review.
Hugh Merriman.
Mr. Speaker, novichok was developed by the Soviet Union in the 70s and the 80s. It's down to the Russians to fill in the gaps, and if they can't do so, then the assumption has to be made, as it has been. Can I ask the Home Secretary to absolutely ensure us that, notwithstanding our success going into the World Cup and the way that we warm towards the Russian people, that we will not let up on the Russian state who stand accused of murdering our citizens or attempting?
Mr. Speaker, I can absolutely give my honourable friend that assurance, and I think he will understand with this particular incident, whilst it's the leading line of inquiry about the connection with the previous incident, we don't want to jump to conclusions, but if it is established that the Russian state is entirely responsible for this as well, then of course we will be considering what further action we can take.
Russia is receiving lots of positive coverage at the moment because of the World Cup, and therefore tackling the disinformation issue is that much more important. Has the Home Secretary or others called in the Russian ambassador, first of all, of course, to hold him to account for this incident, but also to say that the level of disinformation that they are propagating is completely unacceptable and will be challenged?
Mr. Speaker, at this point we have not called on the Russian ambassador or called him in, but as this investigation develops, I think we would want to consider, as I've said earlier, what further action we can take, and that may well include speaking to the Russian ambassador.
Michelle Donnelly.
Speaker, the Amesbury incident is shocking, and I wish the pair affected a swift recovery. I am deeply concerned for Salisbury's local economy and community. Will my right honourable friend commit to the necessary support to Wiltshire to get through this, and also stress again that the government's priority is the safety of residents and that the risk to Wiltshire residents does remain low?
My honourable friend is right to raise this, and I know as a local MP that she will be concerned, and she will be hearing concerns from her constituents, and I can give her that commitment. We will support the local economy, local business, local people in every way that we can. I've already discussed this morning with the Community Secretary, and I know he shares that desire to help in every way that we can.
Andrew James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend my right honourable friend for his statement and recognise this must be understandably a time of great anxiety for local residents. Can he confirm that they are receiving all the public health advice we can provide?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, you can confirm that. There will be obviously, I think, more advice to come from, if and when, as we learn more, from the Chief Medical Officer, from Public Health England. But I know that the police and other agencies are working very closely with the health authorities and making sure that public health advice is updated at all times. But again, let me reiterate, the advice from the Chief Medical Officer and Public Health England is that the risk to the public remains low.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Salisbury attack and Russian disinformation shows how important it is to continue saying our side of the story. I understand the BBC World Service are considering a significant uplift in their broadcasting activities in the Balkans, Eastern Europe and on the borders of Russia. would you consider giving, would the Home Secretary consider giving his support to the BBC World Service at this time, because it is clearly crucial to our safety at home?
So, my honourable friend raises an important point, and I think it's right that we look at how we can counter much of the disinformation that is out there that's coming from Russia, and I think in doing so the World Service can play an important role.
Mary Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, there will be a great temptation to engage in speculation following this latest incident. Would he agree with me that the police must be given the space that they need to be able to fully investigate the facts and establish what exactly happened?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I can give my honourable friend that assurance. And the police investigation, as you will know, has already begun from the moment that this was declared as a major incident. And that means, therefore, it's not just local policing involved, but there's substantial support from counter-terrorism policing. Over 100 officers from counter-terrorism policing already involved in this new incident. But we will continue to make sure they get both the resources that are needed, but also give them the time to complete their work.
Chris Skidmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday, I drove through Salisbury on my way to the excellent Chalk Valley History Festival, also attended by my right honourable friend, the member for Surrey Heath. And driving through the city, you cannot be but struck by the historic beauty of Salisbury, particularly its cathedral. And obviously, the local economy of Salisbury is highly dependent upon international tourism. Will the Home Secretary send out a message to those people intending to visit Salisbury and also nearby Stonehenge, that they must continue to do so against the threat of this effectively terrorism, and that in fact that they should attend Stonehenge, they should go to Salisbury and enjoy the wonderful historic sites?
Is himself a distinguished historian. I trust that he was not merely attending the festival, but orating at it. Well, that's very reassuring to all members of the House. The Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I very much agree with my honourable friend. And yeah, obviously, Salisbury is one of the most beautiful places in our country, and the honourable member for Salisbury shouts "on earth," and I think we will have to agree with him. But I think that whether it's visiting Salisbury itself or nearby towns and villages or Stonehenge, I think that this is all a very good way we can show our support. I would not only encourage members of the public to continue with their plans, I would actually suggest that perhaps it's time to give ourselves an extra reason to make a plan and give ourselves some more determination to actually make a specific special visit.
Order. Point of order, Dame Gerald Gillan.
Mr. Speaker, I seek your advice on a matter that has caused me some concern. While I was out of the country representing the United Kingdom at the Council of Europe, I received an email from an organisation called Global Justice Now. They told me that I would have received emails over the weekend from my constituents about MPs not border guards. They said that owing to a filtering system failure in their organisation, that constituents would be thanking me for signing a pledge, which in fact I had not done so, nor am I aware that I had been even asked to sign this pledge. This was a pledge apparently saying that I would undertake that if anybody visited a surgery in my constituency and was in fact an illegal immigrant, that I would undertake not to report them to the authorities. I am really concerned, Mr. Speaker, that an unaccountable organisation can actually send out information to my constituents about activities in my constituency surgery and effectively telling lies about me, and I have no opportunity to correct it. Now, I appreciate I'm putting it on the record with you now, but could you perhaps take this away and look at how members of Parliament can protect themselves against this sort of misinformation about their activities, because I think it is highly damaging and these organisations are not accountable.
Well, I can well understand why the Right Honourable Lady is very perturbed about the matter, and on hearing her explanation of the sequence of events, I rather imagine that other members listening will be similarly concerned for her and potentially for themselves. As the Right Honourable Lady says, this organisation is not accountable. And I have to admit that it is not an organisation of which I had previously heard, but I have now done so. The matter certainly warrants some thought, and I will give it that thought, including speaking to the Parliamentary Security Director on her and others' behalf about it. As and when I've got anything to disclose to her or to the House, she or the House, possibly both, will hear.
Mr. Speaker, I will arrange for my office to send you the email trail so that you have the evidence of what was sent to me, and I'm grateful for your undertaking to look into this matter.
I look forward to the receipt of that email trail. Well, I don't know whether I look forward to it or not, but I know that I can expect to receive it, and I think that would be helpful to all concerned. I will come to the Honourable Gentleman, but it would be a pity to squander him too early. Point of order, Alex Burkhardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to raise with you an issue that I've encountered a couple of times in recent days. At carriage gates, the pedestrian entrance has relatively new card swipe machines that are quite glitchy, and there have been a couple of occasions when I've struggled to get in. Fortunately, not at a time when I've been coming for a vote, but as someone who often runs things quite fine in getting to the chamber to vote, I wouldn't want myself or indeed other honourable members to find that they couldn't get through carriage gates in a hurry and to affect their business in this chamber. So I was wondering if you could inform me as to who I should report this matter to and what the procedure is for trying to address this concern.
The Honourable Gentleman could inform the Sergeant-at-Arms about the matter, or if he wished to raise it with Eric Hepburn, the Parliamentary Security Director, it's open to him to do so, though I think it's a fairly safe bet that the Parliamentary Security Director will come to learn of the point that the Honourable Gentleman has just made. Clearly, it's very important that those glitches should be reduced to a minimum and that the system should be operationally efficient sooner rather than later. Point of order, Mr. Andrew Bowie.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've just come from a sitting of the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Bill Committee. To say that temperatures in Committee Room 12 are bordering on stifling would be an understatement. We, members and officials, are luckily at liberty to remove our jackets. However, it was brought to my attention that the same courtesy is not extended to the doorkeepers who have to remain in full rig throughout, no matter what the temperature. Might he offer guidance on how action might be taken to allow our hard-working and dedicated doorkeepers the same rights as ourselves in relation to making their workplace conditions as comfortable as possible in the current conditions?
Personally, I very much agree with that. It's not a matter that has been raised with me before, and I remember when I used to sit on the panel of chairs before my fortunate election to the office of Speaker, that I was one of those who always took the view that in hot conditions members should be able to take off their jackets. It was not a view universally held by chairs, and there were chairs emanating from both sides of the House who took what I thought was an excessively trad view of the matter. And, however, the point the Honourable Gentleman makes is an important one, that which we make available to ourselves, and it should be more widely made available. And I wouldn't want dedicated, hard-working, conscientious staff to be working in conditions of extreme discomfort. So I hope that that point can be registered. I think it is probably a matter of discretion for the Chair. If it isn't, it should be, and if it is, they should know how to exercise the discretion in a way that would commend itself to the Honourable Gentleman and, I suspect, to members across the House. Point of order, Mrs. Maria. Point of order, Mr. Charles Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand, Mr. Speaker, that the government, due to pressures on time, has pulled the next debate, which was principle of proxy voting in the House of Commons. This is, of course, a great shame. I understand there are pressing matters of state in play at the moment. We passed a motion in this House on February the 1st to look at proxy voting. The Procedure Committee, which I chair, Mr. Speaker, published its report on May the 15th. We are some 2 months from that point, 5 months plus in total from February the 1st. Mr. Speaker, I am a man of great patience. But babies aren't as patient as I am, and there are a number of colleagues who are expecting to give birth in the next few weeks who are rather hoping that we would get onto this business. If not today, Mr. Speaker, then perhaps next week.
On the same theme, point of order, Mrs Maria Miller.
Further to that point of order, Mr Speaker, we talk a lot about efficiency in this place and we demand efficiency of business. I have to say I don't see today as being a great example of efficiency when it comes to looking at the issue of baby leave. It's clear we have to discuss issues that arise, such as the dreadful instances in Amesbury. But I would urge the government to look at rescheduling the baby leave debate as soon as possible, because time waits for no pregnant woman, and I can see a bump over there that is significantly bigger than it was 5 months ago when we first debated this issue.
I will respond. Well, of course I hear the honourable gentleman. I will respond to those points of order, but as I think it's on the same theme, I'd like to hear from the Shadow Leader and the honourable lady. Valerie Vass.
Mr Speaker, just on the same theme and to support what my honourable colleagues have said, could we have some sort of indication of when we're likely to get the debate back, because it is quite urgent.
Point of order, Emma Reynolds.
Thank you. The biological clock is ticking. Last year I took maternity leave and suffered reputational damage through one of the newspapers for being branded as a lazy MP, somebody who wasn't here for a lot of the time. 3 of our colleagues are expecting babies in the next few months, and one of our colleagues, the honourable member for Eastern Bartonshire, has recently had her baby. I hope we might be able to get these provisions in place for the recess in time for these honourable members to have that proxy voting during their maternity leave.
Hear, hear.
Point of order, Alison Thewlis.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, this is absolutely ridiculous that people have come here in good faith to debate baby leave, a very important thing, which, as we have heard, time is pressing. Can the government give us some kind of date on when this is actually going to happen? Will it happen before recess? How many more babies do have to be born to members of this House before we can start getting some modern practices in place to take care of those women and those babies?
Thank you. I will respond to all of these points at the end, but I may as well take the remaining points of order. Point of order, Vicky Ford.
Delay to the debate on proxy voting. Can we at least make sure that the pairing system is helping those who are expecting in the meantime? Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the...
Can we at least make sure the pairing system that the whips operate is giving the flexibility that our pregnant colleagues need at the meantime?
Point of order, Luciana Berger.
Further to those points of order, Mr Speaker, can I impress upon the Speaker and members of this House and members of the government benches that might be listening that it was many months ago that we had the debate in this House when there were members on both sides that made very urgent and eloquent contributions to say how important this was in advance of us knowing how many colleagues might be affected. And now we're at a juncture at which many of our colleagues are going to be affected. And the reputational issues to many of us that have previously been in this situation were extensive. And we do not know what's around the corner in terms of perhaps future elections, shall we say. So for a variety of different reasons, it's absolutely critical that the government responds to this issue.
Thank you. Point of order, Sir Christopher Chope.
On the same theme, Mr Speaker, the motion which was down on the paper today, there wasn't a motion, it was just going to be a general debate. And perhaps matters could be shortened if the government was now to put down a substantive motion on the order paper, which could be debated next week, and then we could reach a decision on it, because we weren't going to be able to reach a decision today anyway.
Point of order, Nick Dakin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to support the Chair of the Procedure Committee, who has... we've done this work at an accelerated pace and brought a report forward some time ago, as he said. There is really no reason whatsoever for this delay. And as I said to the Leader of the House in business questions last week, we need to get on with this. I agree very much with the member for Christchurch that it would be a very good idea just to move to the opportunity for a vote on the report from the Procedure Committee that has diligently done its job under its excellent chair.
Thank you. Point of order, Helen Whately.
Further to the same point of order, many have mentioned the bumps and therefore the time pressure. There will also be of fathers, or expectant fathers, so to speak, who will also be feeling the time pressure.
Thank you. Point of order, David Linden.
Mr Speaker, on that very theme, this is my daughter who will be born in the autumn, so I am particularly keen to see that this be put in place as soon as possible. But can I ask you, Mr Speaker, on a serious point of order, where is the Leader of the House? The Government has just unilaterally changed the business of the House this afternoon. I'm the acting whip for the SNP today, and I find out by a rumour that this has happened. It is a gross discourtesy to the House, and the Leader of the House should have come to the dispatch box and made an announcement today.
Thank you. Point of order, Dame Gerald Gillen.
Further to these points of order, Mr Speaker, I'm not expecting a baby anytime soon. But I have great sympathy with my colleagues on both sides of the House and those fathers that are expecting. Would it be helpful to make sure that we reassure those colleagues that this House stands firmly behind mothers and mothers that take leave from this House, and that they are not in dereliction of their duty, and no female member of this House should be transduced in this way, but also confirm that the pairing system is alive and well and working. And so even if this excellent report is not actually passed into the standing orders of this House at any stage, but those people that are expecting babies or have to take leave from it, or paternal leave, will be paired by our whips officers.
Ability of pairing. Yeah, very good. The Leader has arrived, and we're grateful to her. Point of order, Mike Gates.
Further to the most recent point of order, I was in a position 25 years ago where I was told by the Chief Whip, yes, I'd be very happy for you to be there when your daughter is born, but be here on Monday night because we've got an important vote on Maastricht. And therefore the birth of the child was then going to determine whether I was breaking the whip or not. Pairing is not satisfactory in those circumstances. We have to have proxy voting.
Point of order, Bob Blackman.
I'm a member of the Procedure Committee, and obviously we looked in very great detail at this. One of the aspects, further to my honourable colleagues' aspects about a pairing, of course the pairing does not apply at the moment to members of the Scottish Nationalist Party. So, can I urge, through you, Mr Speaker, that similar arrangements be made to allow our SNP colleagues to experience the same degree of facility as members of the opposition or the government?
Grateful to colleagues for all of their points of order. Let me emphasise that I understand completely how very disappointed and indeed aggrieved many members feel that the debate that had been scheduled will not now take place today. In fairness, I think it only reasonable to point out that from the government's point of view it was a choice between having an extremely truncated debate of less than an hour or choosing not to move the motion. When the honourable gentleman from the Scottish National Party understandably complains that the debate was summarily withdrawn, he has a point, but the response to that is that, of course, there was a motion for a general debate, and the motion was to be moved by the Leader. And if a motion is not moved, by definition the debate can't take place. And I wouldn't want to impugn anyone's motives in this matter. I want simply to say at this stage, of course I'll come to the Leader, the following. First of all, this is a matter that has been considered over some period, and I want to join the tributes to the excellent and indefatigable chair of the Procedure Committee, the Honourable Gentleman Member for Broxbourne, whose committee did treat of this matter in some detail. Indeed, as is not uncommon in relation to procedural matters, the committee asked me whether I myself would be willing to give evidence to it, which I did. And there is no secret whatsoever that I express support for the principle and practice of proxy voting in circumstances where people were enjoying or seeking to enjoy maternity or paternity leave. That was my very firm view. I appreciate there may be a mixture of views on this matter, but that was my very firm view. I don't. What's caused the amusement? Perhaps I should have used a more neutral term. Perhaps I should have used a more neutral term. Secondly, I think it is not a secret. I think it is not a secret that the support for this idea is not universal, and it is not specifically a party matter. There are people on both sides of the House, particularly those who are accustomed to operating through the usual channels, whose enthusiasm for the idea of proxy voting is, shall we say, not unalloyed. Whether that's got anything to do with the way events have transpired today, I have no way of knowing. To be fair, the Home Secretary's statement was very important, and that statement did have to be made. And the Home Secretary was earlier, as he said, chairing COBRA, and he couldn't be here to make his statement until he got here. The government's rationale for choosing to have a statement on the industrial strategy is a matter for the government. The Minister who came to the House addressed us with his usual charm and courtesy and displayed no little knowledge of the matters under discussion, and was widely questioned. Whether it had to be today, that was a judgment for the government to make. What I would say is that, as people have asked about when it might be rescheduled, I did ask the Deputy Chief Whip, who courteously came to the chair to inform me that the debate would not go ahead today, whether it would soon be rescheduled, and he said that the government would look to the rescheduling of the debate, but that it would have to be done by agreement through the usual channels. My own very firm view, having heard what colleagues have had to say, is that that debate, preferably, to go back to the point of the Honourable Gentleman Member for Christchurch, preferably on a substantive motion, so that the House can decide whether to proceed with proxy voting or not, should take place before the summer recess. It would be perfectly possible for that to happen, but it is for others to determine whether it shall. It would be my preference, but it is not to be decided by the Chair. Now, the Leader has come into the Chamber, and we appreciate that, and she had signalled that she wanted to say something on this matter, and I think it's important that we hear from her. The Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, can I say nobody is more disappointed than I am that we've not been able to carry on with this debate. I've always made absolutely clear my 100% commitment to the vital importance of a secure early bond between parents and their babies. It's something I've had an absolute passion for 20 years, so nobody should be in any doubt about that. I've had a number of meetings with colleagues, and in fact I'd asked my honourable friend, the chairman of the Procedure Committee, last November, when this issue was first raised with me, if the Procedure Committee would be so good as to look into the matter of how to provide proxy voting arrangements for baby leave. He was kind enough to do so, and I pay tribute to him and all members of the Procedure Committee for what was a very well considered report. The purpose of today's debate, however, Mr. Speaker, was to open up the discussion about what is actually quite a significant change to the conventions of this House. And my speech, were I delivering it, would be to ask open questions of members as to how they believe it could best be handled, and whether there are other alternatives, and indeed whether there are potentially unintended consequences. So my intention was to facilitate a debate, and you're absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the events in Wiltshire meant that the Home Secretary couldn't get here before the end of COBRA to make his statement, and unfortunately that led to us having insufficient time to properly air the issues under discussion today. It's absolutely my intention to bring that debate back as soon as possible. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Leader for what she said. I think, colleagues, we've all put our cards on the table. We do need to leave the issue there for today, but knowing the perspicacity of my colleagues and knowing the strength of feeling that exists, not least amongst the chairs of the Procedure and Women and Equalities Committees, to name but two colleagues, there is no way on earth that this issue would go away. even if anybody, and I know the leader doesn't want it to do so, but even if there were somebody in the House who thought, well, perhaps it can be pushed into the long grass, that would be a triumph of optimism and self-delusion over reality and common sense, and no one would want knowingly to be guilty of that. Thank you. We now come to the backbench motion on the future of the transforming... Thank you. We now come to the backbench motion on the future of the Transforming Care programme. And I'm pleased to say that the member who is due to move this motion is here. It's not really a laughing matter. Sadly, there are not a very large number of members wishing to speak in this debate, so it could finish early, or alternatively, the sheer breadth and depth of the learning of the Right Honourable Gentleman Member for North Norfolk, together with his capacity to expatiate with great eloquence on it, could lead to a very full debate. Mr. Norman Lamb.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. And I think I am right in saying that I beg to move the motion that is in my name on the order paper. And can I start by thanking the Backbench Business Committee for facilitating this important debate. Although the numbers of members who've indicated a desire to speak is low, this is an incredibly important issue which deserves to be debated in this House. Can I also thank the Honourable Member for Dulwich and West Norwood for joining me in making the application, together with other members. I've worked very closely with her on an issue I think that we both care very much about. And can I thank a number of voluntary sector organisations that have been incredibly helpful in preparing for this debate. And I mention in particular the Challenging Behaviour Foundation with the very impressive Viv Cooper, who leads that organisation, MENCAP, the National Autistic Society, the Voluntary Organisations Disability Group, and Shared Lives Plus. Madam Deputy Speaker, just spotted the change in time. It is perhaps sobering that we are debating this issue on the 70th anniversary of the NHS. And I say this as someone who is a very strong supporter of the NHS. But with regard to the people that we are talking about in this debate, the record has not been a good one. And we have let down, the system has let down too many individuals and too many families. And it's, I think, important to recognise on this very significant day that the NHS has a lot of work to do to, in a way, repair the damage that has been done to so many people and to treat them in a proper way. Now, the origins of the Transforming Care programme was the horror of Winterbourne View. Now, members will remember that scandal. This was a private hospital where people with learning disability, people with autism, were abused and assaulted behind locked doors over a sustained period of time, only revealed by brave whistleblowers. And in the aftermath of that horror, I became minister in September 2012, and I invited the families of those people who had been patients in Winterbourne View to come to the department to talk to me about their concerns. And I remember very clearly a father called Steve Sollers, who talked to me about how he watched his son become, in his words, increasingly zombie-like as they pumped his son with antipsychotic drugs. And he described how he tried to complain to the local authority and to the, in those days, the Primary Care Trust. And he said, I was just completely ignored. And he said, and this really struck home, I felt guilty that I couldn't do anything for my son. And I was just left thinking how dreadful it is that we've got to a position where state agencies have left an individual, a father, feeling guilty because they are ignoring his pleas for something to be done. And in the months and years following that, I also met with a number of other parents of individuals who had been trapped in hospital, sometimes in unattractive institutions for long periods of time, and all of whom felt that no one was listening to them. And I refer in particular to Phil Wills, who campaigned brilliantly on behalf of his son Josh, who was stuck in a hospital in Birmingham for over 2 years. The family lives in Cornwall, so they had an incredible journey just to maintain contact with their little son. The aunt of a girl called Fawzia, who was in St Andrews in Northampton, her aunt Shahana Hussein, who talked to me about her fears that her niece appeared to be trapped there, and she was anxious that this might be her life course, that she would never emerge from this place. Lynn McCarrick, whose son Chris had been stuck in Calderstones with inappropriate treatment for a very long time. And indeed, Lorna and Sid, the parents of Simone, who is still stuck in hospital 9 years after first admission, and for much of that time a long distance away from home, making it impossible for parents to visit in a really shocking way in this day and age. And many of the families are present for this debate today, Madam Deputy Speaker, because they remain extremely concerned about their loved ones and about others who remain trapped in institutions. And the conclusion that I reached at that time, which I still hold, is that individuals' human rights are routinely ignored, are breached in really serious ways. Someone, when they are convicted of a criminal offence and sent to prison, generally, apart from that cohort of people who receive indeterminate, in the past have received indeterminate sentences, most people know their discharge, their release date. But for people that go into institutions, they don't know their release date, their families don't know. And for many of them, they stay there for much of their lives.